I was about maybe like 11 or 12 at the time.
Yeah.
So I guess I was just on the internet being exposed to all these new ideas, like gender pronouns. You can have control over that, and you're able to change that. And then I'm also learning about it in school at the same time. And
in your classes? In
my classes, yeah.
In your online classes, they had those too?
Yeah. And it was really appealing to me. And
in what ways? What made it appealing, do you think?
I don't know. I guess
we're teaching.
I was always like I'm like a creative person.
Right.
I always was appealed by experimenting with new things and stuff like that. And like just these new options that I have was very appealing to me and my friends and everyone at school. So I was just kind of experimenting, and everyone at school was sort of encouraging me. I was appealed by the idea that you had so much control over your identity and yourself, and you can change that about yourself. I think in total, I was trans for like maybe half a year, maybe longer than that. I actually don't know. So I kind of turned to the people at school and my friends in the GSA as sort of like a second family.
Right.
I didn't really like talk to my parents that much. I sort of just in one ear and out the other ear with everything they said. And then I think the more I really thought about it, because I realized that if I wanted to go through with this, meaning like surgery, hormone blockers, whatever, I had to have like a future. I was going to be a dad. I was going to grow up and be like a grown man. And the more I thought about that, like the more uncomfortable I felt, I guess. Like it was a deep sense of like just kind of grossness. I didn't like the thought of it, but I thought that's what everyone felt, you know?
Right.
Like I wasn't supposed to be comfortable with it. It just kind of had to happen because I wasn't ever going to love my body if I didn't get surgery. Cause that's the answer.
That's the answer.
You know?
Do you mind if I comment on that? Is that all right? You know what I find so interesting about that idea, is that so we start off, as little girls, and then we're going through puberty and we're developing into women, and we feel uncomfortable with the idea of becoming a woman. And we're told, well, young girls are told now, well, the reason you're uncomfortable becoming a woman is because you're supposed to be a man. That'll make you comfortable. And then she's describing the idea of thinking about being a man, feeling just as uncomfortable, if not more. And then the answer is, well, that's normal. You're going to be uncomfortable being a man. So I'm like, it either is or it's not. Like, you know what I mean? So it's normal to feel uncomfortable with the idea of transitioning and becoming a man. It's normal to feel uncomfortable with that. But it's not normal to feel uncomfortable
becoming a
woman.
Yeah.
It can't be one rule for one and not for the other.
Yeah. So the narrative is you're supposed to accept the new uncomfortable feeling you're going to have in your new identity, and that's the way to go.
Yeah. And that's supposed to be, that's okay.
Yeah.
Versus what we would always tell young girls if we were being healthy and a state is it's natural to feel uncomfortable transitioning into becoming a woman as a young girl. Like, of course, it takes you a while to get. You've got hormones.
It takes a decade.
Yeah,
right. It takes quite a long time.
Yeah, it does.
And it's what we go through. That's a big transition, and it takes some of us our whole lives to come to terms with all that change.
Yeah,
but thinking that there's an easy way out, right? To give people an idea that there's an easy way out is the thing that I think is so confusing. What needs to be offered is spiritual directive, because everybody feels kind of an emptiness if they don't realize that they have to spend the practice listening and hearing that small, still voice to know through their intuition what is right and what is wrong. Hello, everyone, and welcome to my podcast. Today we have a bit of a different kind of podcast. This is going to be an audio podcast. I'm going to be talking to two individuals who want to stay anonymous. One of them is a young woman, so she's still a minor, and her parents didn't want her to be seen, and her mother is there too, and we thought with this sensitive subject, that was the only way that they would agree to do my podcast. And I really thought that it would be very useful to people to hear their stories as they go through this time when the daughter was only 10 or 11 years old, when she started to think that she may be a boy. And now she's like 14 and she's a girl still. And she's very happy to be a girl, and she's doing very well. And all of that is in the past. And so I wanted to have a conversation with herself and her mom so that you guys could learn from what they say. So please just take the time it takes just to listen to these two ladies, and they'll tell us what they know. Thanks very much. Welcome to my podcast. I have two guests today. I have Miss A.
Hello.
And Miss S.
Hi.
Hi. Thank you very much for coming onto my podcast. We've known each other for some time now, and I've been an observer so far to their experience in the Toronto District School Board. And I thought it might be helpful to people if they shared their story, their experiences at the Toronto District School Board, to help students and parents know how to navigate the weird kind of political instability we have and the miscommunication that we have between the schools and families and the children who are subject to the schools. So hopefully benefiting from schools, that's what we want. So welcome to my podcast. First of all, I think, Miss S, I'll have you just say when you were at the Toronto District School Board and kind of give us an overview of what was going on.
Sure. If it's okay, I just wanted to start by prefacing why it was important for us to keep our anonymity in this way. I know most of your podcasts, Tammy, are, live video. And, this involves me, but it also involves my daughter A, who's 14. And we thought a lot about the experience that we had. And as, you and I have talked, Tammy, how important it is to share some potential support with other parents who might be struggling. But I also wanted to respect my daughter's youth and privacy, and knowing that this might be something she wants to share right now, but it might be something in the future that she may have a different experience with and thought with. So I just didn't want to take away from her, this story being her story and her being able to share it when she's mature enough in a way that she's more comfortable with. The last thing I want to do is put her in a position where she's sharing something at a young age that she may regret in the future. So that's why I wanted to keep it anonymous.
And we all agree. So we're all on the same page.
Great. Okay, so I have two children who attended the schools in the TDSB, an urban school. And they were in that school system for 10 years now? Or yeah, 10 years. And everything was fine. We felt that there was a lot of transparency between the teachers and the parents.
And this was the public school system in the Toronto District School, right?
That's right. Yeah. And I always felt I had a good relationship with the teachers, and I have a good relationship with my kids too. And they would come home and share what they learned in school, and there's nothing kind of unusual 10 years ago. And then things started to slowly change when I noticed that the content, especially from my son, he would talk about some of the lessons being much more about what I perceived at the time, politics and social justice causes, and less about just subjects. And so, we would have very open conversations at home about the content of what they were being taught. And, my husband and I have our own opinions, and, we were never ones to kind of not want to expose our children to other viewpoints, because I think it's important to do that in order to create awareness and dialogue. And also, you can't combat bad ideas if you're not exposed to them. And I'm, also open to learning. So we like I said, we noticed that some things were starting to change, and there was a lot more focus on critical race theory, LGBTQ content. And, I have no issue with that particularly, but, we would just talk about just simple questions to our kids. Like, are you learning math? Are you learning science? Like, you're learning how to write and read. And I'll just speak for my daughter specifically. She was always a really, really good student, and never really seemed to have any complaints about school or anything like that. Then what would you say how things started? Lockdown happened, or would you say before that?
Lockdown.
Yeah. So lockdown happened, and for many parents, many parents had a hard time with online learning. But we noticed our daughter was going into her shell a little bit. She was, I guess, 11 when things got locked down, and came out 13. So that's a pretty pivotal developmental time to not be around other children.
That's for sure.
Right. And so she, became very, I would describe it as social anxiety, would you say that?
Maybe.
How would you describe social anxiety?
I'd say I just hadn't been around people, and I didn't get to have that, developmental time where I could interact with people my age.
So did you notice that when you went back to school? Is that when you noticed it, or did you notice it during the lockdown too?
Just during the lockdown, yeah. So I turned to the internet and being online all the time and just staying in my room.
Right.
And I was inside all the time.
And so was that mainly social media that you were engaged in? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and it was tough because, we were working, and it's hard, it's interesting because I hear a lot of parents talk about, you don't allow your kids to have access, and you keep them engaged, and I agree with that. But I also think realistically, if parents are working and you have a job, you can't, and you don't have money for childcare or a nanny or whatever, it's really challenging and then you're locked down, it's really challenging to monitor and micromanage everything that your child does.
Yeah,
and
virtually impossible, I would say.
Yeah, I would say so. And also they're online with school. I can't walk in every second to just make sure. And it's also, there's an element of, for me, I was, as a child, I was hyper controlled So I also just wanted to, I didn't want to be that type of parent that was constantly bombarding their child, because I know that backfires too. So it was really hard to strike that balance at the beginning of, like, my gut was telling me I just don't feel like she should be as isolated in her room. But then the other part of me was, I also don't want to be constantly forcing her to come out of her room, because she would come out, stay for a bit, and then go back in. It was a really, really tough time. And then there were so many factors involved around, like, is it lockdown? Is it, going through the change that young women go through at that age? Is it like, there's so many elements to it.
How long was lockdown? How long did you have no in-school brick and mortar classes?
Maybe 2 years.
2 years.
Yeah.
Unbelievable. 2 years. I can't even imagine what that's like.
Yeah.
2 years.
Yeah.
So I guess I was just on the internet being exposed to all these new ideas, like gender pronouns. You can have control over that, and you're able to change that. And then I'm also learning about it in school at the same time. And
In your classes?
In my classes, yeah. And
In your online classes, they had those too?
Yeah. And it was really appealing to me. And
in what ways? What made it appealing, do you think,
I don't
of
know,
what
I guess
we're teaching?
I was always like I'm like a creative person.
Right.
I always was appealed by experimenting with new things and stuff like that. And like just these new options that I have,
Right.
was very appealing to me and my friends and everyone at school. So I was just kind of experimenting, and everyone at school was sort of encouraging me.
And so there was not only talking on social media, was there talking on the phone too then, just with other people that were in the classes about these issues?
Yeah, and I had some other friends outside of school. One of my friends, I was about maybe like 11 or 12 at the time. One of my friends, who was like 2 years maybe older than me, came out to me as a lesbian, and I didn't know what that meant.
How old were you when that happened?
Maybe 12 or 11.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know, I didn't ask much about it, but I was appealed by the idea that you had so much control over your identity and yourself, and you can change that about yourself.
Mm-hmm. So this was lockdown. So let's get back to lockdown. You were at home in your room, going to classes. How many hours a day did you have classes?
Normal school hours, but
9 to 3 kind of, right?
Yeah, but we weren't on call with the teachers all the time. It was like 2 calls a day, and then we would kind of work on our own.
And when you were working on your own, was that also online, or was that independent?
Yeah, online work.
Oh, I see, online work. So you were working on a website, a school website? Right, I see. And then was there any interaction with kids outside of school or the school after hours?
Yeah. I mean, I had friends, I would like call them after school and stuff like that.
But there wasn't any seeing anybody else really for quite a while.
No, we weren't allowed. Yeah.
Right. So very, very limited access to information and to really discussing these things, especially face to face.
Yeah. I mean, my husband and I, we talked about these issues a lot. And, one thing my husband and I used to say is, like, our daughter would, we'd feel, I don't know if this is true, but we would feel her get her back up, when we would talk about these things. And, I don't know if there was a literal rolling of your eyes, but there was a sense that, she just was like, oh gosh, here they go again, So the idea that, as a parent, you want to obviously teach your kids your values, but if we were getting a sense that it was getting a bit too much, and it was actually having the opposite effect, to just say she's just sick of hearing all this, so we better just stop talking about these things, even though it was everywhere and we were concerned, but not specifically about but just in general. And And we could, would you say that that's how you felt? Like we were talking about
for
it?
sure.
Yeah.
And was there anything in the gender classes that you took that would make you feel that maybe your parents shouldn't know what you were doing? Was there anything in there?
I mean, like hearing them talk about these things, which I guess would be more considered like conservative point of views. I obviously, when I started questioning these things, I was like, my parents won't understand. I'm not even going to try telling them. And also being in school and learning that these things that my parents were thinking were bad, I didn't want to tell them because I didn't want them. I guess I thought they would get mad or I would be in some sort of trouble. And I just didn't want to like start anything, or I just kept it to myself. Yeah.
So if I'm understanding you correctly, then what you were learning was to keep what you were learning about these things silent and not discuss them with your parents, because if you did, there would be some sort of miscommunication and uncomfortable conversations that would happen. So you were, told that it was not a good idea to share this information at home.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that was, to that point, like this, we may be jumping ahead, but, Tammy, I think that was literally enabled by, in a direct way, not just a subtle, indirect way, right? That there was a, what was it called? Gender and Sexuality Club?
Yeah, I joined the GSA club, which was, I think it was Gender Sexuality Alliance or
right.
something.
And, as parents, we're usually informed in newsletters and et cetera of all the clubs. So that wasn't in any of the newsletters, that specific club. And, I learned this after the fact, after A and I talked about it at length. But so there was this club that, again, the parents weren't informed existed. And it was actively, the children were actively told, and again, this is a public school. This isn't a high school. The elementary school. This is not a high school.
Right.
And the children were told that if they didn't believe their parents would support them, they could come to the teachers who are running this club as their support.
I see.
Right. So it wasn't just, let's figure out a way, if this is something you're experiencing, gender dysphoria or whatever, let's figure out a way together to bring your parents in on the conversation, to try to, help navigate it. That wasn't part of the conversation. It was, well, if your parents aren't supportive, don't worry about it. We're here for you.
Right.
That was explicitly told to the kids.
And so in terms of the club itself, what do you think the purpose was to have this club?
I'd say basically just to help kids feel safe, I guess. To like get them away from the quote unquote unsupportive people in their lives, like, and just kind of sort of educate them on all these things that are going on. And I was maybe in grade 7, which was like 12, 13. And the teacher would go from class to class, starting at like maybe grade 4 or 5, saying that anyone can join if they want to. You don't have to be gay or whatever to join. You can just be a supporter. And I went there and all my friends went there. So I joined the club, and at the beginning of every meeting, we would go around the circle and state our preferred name and preferred pronoun. So, and we would have to do that every single time. So it was really easy to sort of like switch it up every lesson, I guess. And I felt myself doing that.
Right. As everybody else was doing it. Right.
And we sort of just, I felt myself kind of gravitating towards changing my name to something else. And I was talking to my teachers about it, and we would spend time going on like baby name websites and picking out a name that I thought was nice.
Yeah, like a new identity. So this is like a baby. That's a new life.
Yeah.
That's manipulative. I mean, as far as I can see,
intense.
That definitely sounds manipulative.
So I was like basically a completely separate person from what my parents knew me as, and what everyone else knew me as, except for in that club.
Oh, so even in the rest of the time at school, you wouldn't use these different pronouns and different pet names that was only within the club?
No, I was nervous to do so, but there were lots of people that did.
I see.
Change their name openly. And the teacher even said to me that if I wanted to, I could change my name in school. And when they had my attendance, they would call my new name, but on the report card that got sent home to my parents, they could use my regular name.
Oh, yeah.
And they wouldn't need to know.
And, just to sort of, so, I appreciate all of that.
Yes, thank you.
Context. Yeah, no, thank you for that. That was really good. And, and if I could just share about what I was witnessing during that time, is I was witnessing my child go through like withdrawing. Her shoulders were hunched over. She wasn't smiling. She wasn't happy. She didn't appear to be happy, very isolated, very quiet. She wasn't, I would say is introverted, but not like, she's also adventurous. She likes to do things. She's not a hesitant child, was like up for any new, oh, that's new, let's try it. She's that person. And so that all disappeared, like wanting to even go out and do things once lockdown ended and things were going back to normal. And I attributed part of that to lockdown, but I also felt that it was also that stage of development, the puberty stage of development, just feeling really being a child going into lockdown and then coming out a young woman, where you're a completely different person. And so, I attribute it all to that, but I also, identified and related to, even though it wasn't, my experience at that age wasn't so extreme because I wasn't locked down, but just going through that change, I felt very self-conscious. I felt very insecure. What I tried to do with her is I tried to just continue sharing my own experience that I felt at her age in an attempt to gain some sort of open dialogue and trust and, regain that communication. So I kept, no matter what, even if it fell on deaf ears, and even if it didn't seem to open her up to me, I continued those conversations where I would talk about myself and I would say, this is how I felt at this age, and this is what I thought at this age. And I was on, like, I had an eating disorder at the age that A is talking about her experience. And, I didn't know if I wanted to share that with her because, there's a fear, for me anyway, it was a fear that if I share something, it might give her ideas. It's like, oh, I can go down that road too. But my intuition was really strong, and I felt I had to create a familiarity, if at all, I could somehow resonate, something that I experienced would resonate with her, to kind of keep that relationship strong. Because, again, like children, you can't force them to listen to you. Like, you can take away privileges for sure, but you can't force them to agree with you or listen to you or integrate your value system, no matter how much you think you can. You can't. They either will or they won't. And I wasn't going to force, even though the impulse was so strong to kind of want to go like shake her and like, what's going on? What's happening? But I just allowed, I have a strong spiritual practice that is very much a part of who I am. And so that is where I went to draw strength to not go with those impulses as a scared, desperate parent to just want to bully my way into figuring out what the hell was going on with my kid, and I would just try to turn those impulses over, to my higher power, my God of my choosing, and just say, be with me as I I don't know how to navigate this. So just help me. And, you know, intuitively, I was just given the guidance to just keep the communication open, just keep talking. This is go for the long, like it's a long game. It's not a short game. And even if you don't see any evidence of connection, just keep reaching for the connection. And it's hard, you know, you feel rejected all the time. But yeah, I kept going. And I suppose at this point, I didn't really know what was going on. But at some point you did open up to me.
Well, you went from lockdown. Now you've gone back to school.
Yeah, I was in the GSA in person, and then when we went back, I think like before we did online school, I was in the GSA, and then I did a little bit of GSA online, but it didn't really work out very well. But then when I was back in school, I went to the teacher who sort of like was the head of the GSA, and I told her that I was going to go and come out to my mom. So when I went home that day, everyone at the GSA was like congratulating me, wishing me that it went well, because I was telling them all that my mom was transphobic and whatnot. So I go home that day and I take my mom on a walk and I tell her everything. And I was convinced at this point that I had gender dysphoria solely based on the fact that at that stage I was self-conscious and hated my body as every teenager did, but also based on the fact that I was a tomboy as a kid and I always had short hair and I was into more like boyish things, I guess. Not some things, but that sort of was amplified. And I never really had long hair I always had short hair as a kid. And I used that as sort of evidence that I had gender dysphoria all along.
Right, just your hairstyle. Yeah,
pretty much.
Yeah,
and that you didn't like Barbies. That's about it. That was it. I mean, to be honest, like she's very crafty, very art. Like if you want to go down the road of like traditional girl tasks and boy tasks, like she wore dresses. She liked them. She liked building things. So she built Lego, but they were, you like the girl Lego stuff more than you like the boy Lego stuff. And, she's very crafty. And the only thing is that she didn't just like dolls. That was it.
Yeah. I think girls often, I'm not certain of this, but I think they really like detail, right? Yeah. They like detail, whereas guys sometimes choose large motor skills. And so, I mean, I liked building little doll houses. I was more interested in building the doll houses. And I changed their clothes, but that was about as much as I ever did with my dolls.
Right.
I liked to change their clothes and I liked to build them houses. You know what I mean? Is that feminine? Yeah, partly. But it's also, I still like building houses.
Yes, you do. That's true.
So who would have known that building houses out of books was going to lead to me building houses? I didn't know that.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Well, I can remember being 12.
Yeah.
I was just worried about, what's this? I have to wear this thing called a brassiere and this lacy thing under my shirt, which was probably a good idea because I was very confused about the little bumps under my shirt and what they were going to look like, and what people were going to think of me, because I was so concerned about what I thought of myself. And I have learned that the more you think about yourself, the more confused you become. And that this whole spiritual awareness of service, of giving service, of being there for other people helps you to get out of yourself. But this attention to ourselves, which for some reason really intensifies, I think because our bodies are changing so much, it's just such a shock.
Yeah.
It's just a shock to the system, because here we were, little kids, swimming and playing baseball and digging for worms and like doing all kinds of stuff that we like to do. And now all of a sudden our bodies are changing and we're like, what?
Yeah.
Right? We question, what? And now the school has an answer for us?
Yeah.
Like, I don't think so. Anyway, you did for a while think, yeah, an answer. And you came to your mother. And what happened when you came to your mom and had that conversation?
I think she told me something like, I know or something along the lines of that. She knew that this wasn't truly who I was. And I don't remember what she said.
Well, it's interesting. Yeah, I do remember. I remember it. It's definitely implanted in my brain because we went for a walk and she said verbatim, you know how, because she had short hair for a while. She says, you know how some people think I'm a boy? And I said, yeah. And she says, well, I just want to let you know that doesn't bother me. And I went, okay. I know it was really hard for her to talk about it. And she said, well, sometimes people think I'm a boy and I don't change I don't correct them. And I knew where she was going with this, so I didn't press her. And I just listened, and we were walking. And I said, well, can I tell you what I think? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, I said, typically this, gender dysphoria is a real thing. It happens. But it's a really tiny percentage of the population. And I said, usually it runs in families. Like it's not an outlier. Just like some people have a predisposition to some families have a predisposition to a certain thing. And I said, it really isn't something that is in our family, either side. So I said, the likelihood of it being true is probably small. And then I just said, and then I just shared about, body dysmorphia, like feeling really uncomfortable in your body and very self-conscious and just wanting things to change. And I said, it's very common during puberty for girls to feel that way, to just feel like their body they're not comfortable with it and they just want to hide it. And I said, when I was young, the answers to typical normal body dysmorphia that I said some girls feel it more intensely than others. I said I felt it very, very intensely, and I knew some of my peers didn't. So I said, you probably feel it as intensely as I felt it. So I can understand how it must be very, very difficult to manage. I said, but at my time, the answer was, starving yourself and, getting skinny, and anorexia was a big thing. And then it became bulimia. And then I said, then it became cutting. Like I said, every generation, there's a new answer to combat this normal rite of passage of going through puberty and body dysmorphia that teenage girls, most of them feel. And I said, now you're in a time frame when this is the answer that's being given to you, is, well, then you must be trans. And I said, the difference though now, which is upsetting, and I don't know if I shared this in this particular conversation, but I know I shared it with A at different times, is that it's being enabled. I said, when I felt that I was fat, I wasn't encouraged by teachers.
You didn't have teachers telling it was a good idea?
I didn't have teachers telling me to starve myself. I didn't have teachers telling me that I should just throw up my food. Everybody recognized it as being a disordered reaction.
Right. And there was never a time where people encouraged them to cut themselves to make them feel better. That just never happened.
It never happened.
Yeah.
And
so this is different.
This was very different. And so, and I didn't believe either. Like the irony is, when people told me and my body was fine, I didn't believe them either, Yet no one supported me, and I still didn't believe them.
Right.
And I said, now we're in a situation where you are getting quote unquote support. You're getting, and like, again, I couldn't even imagine what it would have been like if, I had claimed at 13 that I was overweight and I really wanted to get skinny, or I hated my breasts and I wanted to get them enlarged or whatever. And having a whole group of kids applaud me and having teachers say, don't worry, we're going to help you even if your parents don't support you. Like, just the idea of that is so, it's so corrupted, I can't even imagine what that was like. So anyway, we had this conversation. I got the sense I wasn't penetrating her at all. Like, she listened, but she didn't believe me or agree with me, let's say. And I actually called you and I just said, oh gosh, this happened and it's very stressful. And, you were very supportive and, just reminded me that, and I think you had told me not to tell your dad.
I said, don't tell anyone.
Right. But I didn't.
Yeah.
I did. I did, but I only told 2 people. But I can't remember when I told your dad. Did you say don't tell your dad? And I said I have to? I don't remember that part.
No, you said I won't.
Okay. So I either did or I waited until you agreed for me to tell him. I couldn't remember which one. But I just told, like, he was really upset. And I just told him, I said, listen, I'm managing it. Like, I'm going to manage it. I'm just going to keep this conversation going. And that's all I can do. And then I think what I did was I kept checking in with you every once in a while. So how's that going? Do you still feel that same way? And do you remember me doing that at all? No. Okay.
You told me that you may have showed her some films or videos, one Abigail Schreiber video. I remember you telling me that you shared that one.
I don't think I did it right then.
Oh, maybe it was later.
I think it was later because I got a sense that
it's on gender dysphoria and just the details of going down that road.
Yeah, I don't think again, she was young. I didn't feel that was the right approach at that point. Honestly, I just felt intuitively I kept being guided to keep the conversation going. I'm here.
That must have been hard to just be so hands off.
Yes.
Right? And but committed, but hands off.
Yeah. No, that's exactly it. And I knew that from addiction, because I had suffered from an addiction, and I knew that being hyper involved, somebody in my own addiction when I was deep in it is the wrong approach. I knew that from my own experience and also from my own work with it, that, we can't force people to get better. We just have to always have the door open. Just like I'm here, the door is always open, because, the quicker, the more, if I pushed, it would be easier for her to fall in the arms of somebody else who was gonna support her.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, because, we know too that people, but in general, but kids look for attention. They look for attention, and attention is love. And so if you're there, and like you say, the communication's open, then there's attention there. There's love there.
Mm.
And that is, I can see being in a situation where the learning can still happen, because it has to happen in your daughter's time, in your time, in God's time. It all has to happen.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah.
With nobody pushing it too hard.
Mm-hmm. And to add to that, at the same time, and I don't know if you remember this, but I would also talk about my conscience, everyone's conscience and everybody's intuition. And I would talk about that relationship with God and a conscience that exists within us, that tells us the truth, and that in order to access that, we have to be quiet, and we have to be receptive, and we have to ask, right? And I would talk a lot about that, how that has helped me in navigate confusing things and confusing times. And so that I tried to communicate that practice to both my kids, but especially my daughter, and say, it's in you. You just have to find it. You have to be quiet enough to find it. And my intention was to instill her with the confidence of knowing that voice will never let you down, and it will always be available to you if you allow it to speak to you. And I would talk about how that's helped me through times. So
yes, I think that's a really super important point. Because I'm thinking, the teachers are there saying, we are here to support. We are here to answer your call of needing support. But we have our support within us that we can listen to and find guidance from. But it's such a quiet, still voice that you have to be very patient and quiet to hear. And maybe, also with all the social media and stuff, we have a kind of a noisy world now, right? Because you're always being, we have these phones that will tell us anything and make noise of any kind. These computers, so there's so much coming in. It's hard to separate out and listen.
yeah.
So you got back to school and you had a conversation with your mom, and so you did, step forward a little bit to see what was there. But what did you think after that conversation?
I thought my mom was completely transphobic and
Oh,
she didn't
dear.
support me at all.
Uh-huh.
So that's what I did. I went to school the next day and I told everyone that my mom didn't support me, and it went super badly.
So, oh
A
dear.
bit extreme. But so yeah, I kind of
How long did that period of time last?
few months maybe.
Few months.
And then yeah, I think in total I was trans for like maybe half a year, maybe longer than that. I actually don't know. So I kind of turned to the people at school and my friends in the GSA as sort of like a second family. I didn't really like talk to my parents that much. I sort of just in one ear and out the other ear with everything they said.
And
then I think the more I really thought about it, because I realized that if I wanted to go through with this, meaning like surgery, hormone blockers, whatever, I had to have like a future. I was gonna be a dad. I was gonna grow up and be like a grown man. And the more I thought about that, like the more uncomfortable I felt, I guess. Like it was a deep sense of like just kind of grossness. I didn't like the thought of it. But I thought that's what everyone felt,
Right.
Like I wasn't supposed to be comfortable with it. It just kind of had to happen because I wasn't ever going to love my body if I didn't get surgery. Cause that's the answer.
That's the answer.
Do you mind if I comment on that? Is that all right? You know what I find so interesting about that idea, is that so we start off, as little girls, and then we're going through puberty and we're developing into women, and we feel uncomfortable with the idea of becoming a woman. And we're told, well, young girls are told now, well, the reason you're uncomfortable becoming a woman is because you're supposed to be a man. And so that'll make you comfortable. And then she's describing the idea of thinking about being a man, feeling just as uncomfortable, if not more. And then the answer is, well, that's normal. You're going to be uncomfortable being a man. So I'm like, it either is or it's not. Like,
Right.
you know what I mean? So it's normal to feel uncomfortable with the idea of transitioning and becoming a man. It's normal to feel uncomfortable with that. But it's not normal to feel uncomfortable
Becoming a woman.
becoming a woman.
Yeah, a
Like,
biological
woman that's your own.
Yes.
That's your biological sex. Like it's
Yeah.
it has to if you're supposed to be comfortable in your body, then shouldn't you be comfortable with the idea of being a man? Like what's the so
Right.
you know what I mean? Like doesn't that seem strange now
Mhm.
as an idea? It's like it either is or it's not.
Yeah.
It can't be one rule for one and not for the other.
So the narrative is you're supposed to accept the new uncomfortable feeling you're going to have in your new identity, and that's the way to go.
Yeah, and that's supposed to be that's okay.
Yeah.
Versus what we would always tell young girls if we were being healthy, and a state is it's natural to feel uncomfortable being transitioning and to become into becoming a woman as a young girl? Like, of course, it takes you a while to get. You've got hormones.
It takes a decade.
Yeah,
right. It takes quite a long time, and it's what we go through, starting out as little kids, really very similar to little boys. Like we just kind of play together, I mean, and then all of a sudden you become a woman. And what is a woman? What is a woman? A woman can have children.
Yes.
Right? Or has the potential to have children, has the potential to take care of young and to become married to a man. So to leave her home where her mom and dad is and become married to a man, that's a big transition. And it takes some of us our whole lives to come to terms with all that change.
Yeah. Yeah.
But thinking that there's an easy way out, right? To give people an idea that there's an easy way out is a thing that I think is so confusing.
Yeah.
It's not easy at all.
So you were feeling the idea of imagining yourself as a grown man started to feel uncomfortable. And then what happened?
I think it was like more of a gradual thing. Like the uncomfort was sort of getting harder to silence. And
were there any other kids at school feeling that also they were uncomfortable? Did you have anybody to talk to at school?
Well, I don't think I had anyone who went to the extremes that I went to, really.
No.
Which is weird. I didn't have like any surgery or medications or anything like that.
Did you have friends that did have surgeries and did have medications, like hormones that they took?
No. Well, not in my school. I don't think I really knew anyone that well who did.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this isn't, that common yet. But it's too common, but hopefully it's not just everywhere.
But you had told me that the woman who was running, the teacher who was running this organization said that you wanted about the binding.
Oh, yeah. She said that there was this organization. I don't even remember what it was called. And they would give you like free binders if you went. You didn't have to buy it online. You just showed up at this place and they could give you a binder for free that someone donated, and you wouldn't have to tell your parents or anything.
So a 13-year-old telling a 13-year-old to go to a place, quote unquote, a place by themselves and get something from some person. It's being encouraged our taxpayer dollars are encouraged, are paying for someone to encourage a child to go out into some place in the city to pick up something.
Well, I remember when I was 15, I went to the doctor to get birth control. Never told my mom. Didn't have to tell my mom. That was in the 70s, right? So even back then, you went somewhere and were given something that the Medicare is paying for, that the healthcare is paying for, and my mom had no idea. And so when I became depressed from taking this thing, she didn't know why I wasn't feeling well. She had no idea. She was worried about me, but she didn't know even where to ask. And we're continuing to do these kinds of things, separating kids from parents, or separating kids from being able to have someone that they really
trust,
someone who's been there and will be there, which is family, who's been there and will be there.
Yeah.
And take you through these uncertain times.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the idea of, my 13-year-old child taking the subway somewhere by themselves, who knows what time, like, what if something happened? Like, who's liable then?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I start to think about that. Like, are you then responsible if something happens to my child when she goes out to a place you told her to go to and you set it up without her parents knowing? Like, how did it get so bad that these things are being encouraged in our school system, in our public school system?
Well, I'm hoping that it's conversations. It's everyone knowing what's going on. I think that will help. I can't see how that can't be helpful, because then people will think about this and will be more aware of what's happening in our school system.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, correct me if I'm wrong, but, you told me that it came to you very strongly, like you realized that you called me into your room and you said, and you were crying and you said, Mom, I realized I was wrong. Mm-hmm. Right? And yeah, go ahead.
So that was after months of maybe of wondering about it and feeling discomfort.
I'd say about like a month, a few weeks of like that strong discomfort. I remember this exactly. We were driving home from Dairy Queen and I was in the car and I was like just thinking, like, I don't know. I think I might have just been wrong this whole time. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm so scared. And then
What were you scared of, do you think?
I was scared of, honestly, the people in the GSA and my friends like leaving me or them getting mad at me. So it's kind of like it was reversed. It was like I have to tell someone because this is like really stressing me out. Like I need to tell someone. So I told my mom, and then she asked me like, what can I do? Do you need like, I don't know, do you want to dye your hair? Do you want to wear makeup? Whatever. Do you want to go get some nice clothes? And I was like, I don't know what I want to do. So it took about maybe like a few months to get to where I am now. And I'm honestly pretty at peace with myself now.
Oh, that's so nice to hear.
Yeah, I remember that moment where she called me to her room and it was really sad. I had never seen her cry, so she wept. And she said, I think I was wrong. I think I was wrong this time. And I gave her this big hug. And then she said, I've wasted so much time. I just remember her saying that. I wasted so much time. And I just hugged her and I said, you didn't waste, you'll get it back.
Yeah, you didn't waste time.
You
had to think this through and it took a long time to think it through.
Yeah. I mean, I know that you feel that way when you're 13, that 6 months is a lifetime.
And it is.
And it is.
Yeah, it is.
But I said, you're going to find your way back. And I kept asking, what was it? Like, what was it that told you? Did you read something somewhere? Did you, because I was trying to think that, like, did you read something? Did someone say something? And she just said, no, it just came to me. And I said, well, that's God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just listening to that part of you that speaks to you. And it's interesting the way you describe it. And you say it was quiet and then it got louder and louder and louder. It was almost like you listened to that little quiet voice.
Yeah.
And it went, you're listening. Okay, I'm going to get louder and louder and louder and louder until you have the courage to go into the new unknown, the new unknown of now I have to undo all that I've done and come out. And actually, I have a question. So when you began to take the steps to find your way back to your true self, how was the response that you got from other people?
Mm-hmm.
Well, honestly, I don't talk to most of the people from that school now. I think a few people, like the few people that I told, mostly because I moved and I kind of just like stopped talking to everyone because I was so afraid of the confrontation that I would have to face and just telling everyone. So I just kind of like ghosted them all. And then the few people I did tell from my old school, they were kind of just like, okay. But honestly,
it's not too bad.
Yeah, but it is kind of bad because I think in that time I influenced them to become trans as well, and they're still like that now, and it's like my fault, but there's nothing I can do about it now.
Well, you don't know that it's your fault, but I understand.
Though.
I know you feel that way, that you. Well, it's
because it only started after I told them, and then slowly they started doing it themselves.
Mm-hmm. Well, if
that's what this thing is like, though. It's an ideology and it's shared among people.
Mm-hmm.
It's shared among people. So there isn't any one person. It's kind of like percentages.
Social contagion.
Yeah.
That's why they call it social. Well, it's interesting because these two girls who now identify as boys, that A is describing, like I've known them since they were little, and they both, they did look up to you. Like they wanted to be her friend more than she wanted to be theirs. Not in a bad way, but just, you could just tell, it's like, so there was this, but they were very, like, one had, like, they both had other comorbidities. Like, that's always been there. One was socially awkward and the other one had like high anxiety. Like, they weren't
at peace.
They weren't stable children from other causes, and it was pretty clear that that's what it was, that there were other. So
people actually who have, like you said, more comorbidities, but more other issues that they have to deal with, say in their personality or their social life, then they're
vulnerable.
Then they're vulnerable to trying to find a place to peace. And this is what's offered when what needs to be offered is spiritual directive, because everybody feels kind of an emptiness if they don't realize that they have to spend the practice listening and hearing that small still voice to know through their intuition what is right and what is wrong. Yeah. And because we're not taught to go that way, we're taught to choose these other things like changing your gender as a solution, and it's awkward. It's awkward.
Yeah. Well, just even to take it away from the gender for a moment, is that when we have an internal problem and we're being told that every solution to your internal problem is external, and there's no time to go, what is in me that's vulnerable? What is it in me that's susceptible? What is it in me that perhaps I need to look at in order for me to be more resilient, more immune, more whatever the quality that I could integrate within myself to help me. That's not at all taught anymore, and so it's like, if it's not gender, it'll be something else. If it's, it's right. Like,
it'll be the next thing, whatever it is.
Yeah, whatever. It could be anything. It's like, I don't have enough money. Well, that's why I'm miserable. I don't have, I'm not pretty enough. That's why I'm not, like, it's whatever. It could be anything. And it's a real tragedy that children aren't supported in the school system to be able to look within themselves, and see if there's anything that they're vulnerable, how they're internally vulnerable, and what can be done about that.
But our communities, I think too, don't you think communities are important? Like, you have a community now at home, and without that community of home, where would you have turned to, right? So that's why our families are important, because they give us that community, that's solid community that we can depend on and rely on and turn to.
I guess what I mean is, I agree, it has to be in the community, and the family has to be the genesis of that. But I guess my point is that if your kids are spending 6 hours a day in a school, and the teachers are going to be dealing with social problems, they are going to be dealing with personality, children's psychological challenges. And so what are they doing with that is my point. Like, what framework are they working? And it's no longer about, again, adopting learning resilience or
personal responsibility
or any of that. It's all like, there's something external that needs to be addressed.
Right.
Either you change it or you force somebody else to change. It's a completely different paradigm that all it's creating is angry, bitter victims, unfortunately.
So what kind of changes did your family make during this time?
Well, the timing kind of worked out for us because, we're not from, we're average middle class family. We it was kind of for all three of us, for my husband, myself, we no longer wanted to live in Toronto for other reasons. The school system was part of it, but it wasn't the only part of it. We didn't know what we would do. We were concerned about we couldn't homeschool. That wasn't an option for us. either financially or with time. And so I was looking, and then, both of our work situations opened up so that we could leave the city. And I mean, there's the fear was that we would still end up in the same situation, even if we went to a different school board. And the truth is, we might still be. It's not that, right now things are fine, but I feel like we really dodged a bullet with A, and, she's in a much better place, which I'm sure she will speak to be able to witness that type of teaching, ideology, gender ideology, critical race theory, all that's still being taught, maybe not to the same extent, right? Yeah. But she's much more in touch with what she believes, at least for now, around it. And I think she's much more open to conversations with us and with other people. And you found friends too that kind of share some of your values more, wouldn't you say? So we left the city, and we moved out to a smaller city, where it's definitely less prevalent than it is in the TDSB, for sure. I'm hoping that things have reached such a tipping, like a critical mass at the TDSB, that things will start to quiet down, which will have, kind of a ripple effect to other school boards where they witness, like, oh my gosh, it's gotten so bad at the TDSB. The protests are, parents aren't standing for it anymore. So let's just keep things the way they are. That's what I'm hoping for, but we'll have to see.
Yes, that's what I'm hoping for too, because what the stories that I hear of the children's stories coming from the TDSB, there's some changes that really have to be made. We have to decide, are we going to continue down this path of social justice and critical race theories, and also division between parents and kids?
Right.
Really,
yeah,
we better think hard about that, because I don't think that that's taking us, are we teaching math? Are we teaching literature? Are we teaching the sciences? Those, how to write, are those basic, that's education. Are those the pinnacle of what is being offered there? If it isn't, then there's some misdirection.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you both for your bravery in coming out here and discussing. Is there anything further that you'd like to say, or before we call it a day?
If it's okay, I'd like you to share a bit about how you look back on that whole part of your experience and how you perceive it now, given that you went through such a tough time. Well, you've shared with me about how you don't look back with regret, like.
Yeah. I'm honestly, I'm pretty happy that it happened, because I wouldn't have come out the same way as I am now. And I know most girls my age now are still having problems with their confidence in their appearance and whatever, but I think I've sort of not gotten over it completely, but I'm much better than other people my age. So, and I've become more empathetic, more open to like conversation, more able to understand. If I meet other people like that, I'm able to have conversations and be friends with them. And just, I'm happy that it happened.
Isn't that something how we end up learning? Now we have to go through things. We have to go through it to find a better way. We can't avoid it. Otherwise it hangs around, right? Yeah. So that's great. That's a very good outcome.
It is a good outcome.
And I have friends that I wouldn't have met if this didn't happen to me, that share some similar experience with me and share some of the same values that I do. So, yeah.
Good. Well, that's good. And I think, for young people who are listening, conversations. having conversations, because as we all know, we don't understand ourselves very well. And if we can have conversations with other people, we can understand ourselves better.
Yeah.
And so you can't just keep everything to ourselves, because if we keep it to ourselves, some of our thoughts might not be really clearly thought out. And so if we share with someone, we can see whether we have our minds straight or not.
Yeah.
It's really important that you have some close confidant, like your mother, your father, your sisters, your brothers, a close friend. And it might be a teacher. It might be. It'll have to be somebody who's in your life and trustworthy. Someone who your family knows, your friends know. Someone who you can really share with anyone. So this isn't like someone that you've met and you keep secret from everybody else. That's not what I mean. I mean that you share with someone who is someone that you can trust, and that your brother would trust, that your parents would trust. Maybe it is your parents, maybe it's your grandparents, aunts, uncles, Find those people and talk to them.
One last quick thing I would say for parents is don't give up, but also don't force anything. Just hold it, be committed. You said it perfectly before, Tammy, when you said, keep at it, but hold it lightly. That way there's space for that child to come to you when they're ready, but don't give up, but also don't push them away.
Yeah, I think if you're looking for learning and looking for understanding, and if you're quietly waiting for that, you can see it when it happens. If you're spending too much time trying to change things yourself, you may miss opportunities for good communication. So that listening is super important.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Have a great day.
You too.